the Mutual Broadcasting System presents Richie and John.
In the age of innovation, oh how times have changed. Electric dreams we ride on, but the road's been rearranged. There's a buzz in the air, but it's not the hum of wheels. It's the chatter of politics, casting shadows on deals. Turn up the sound, it's the Richie and John show, where we'll navigate the currents and the winds that blow. Todd Bianco is back to talk cars, but with a different perspective. Elon Musk is no hero, but a Nazi with Buddy Trump, both of them defective.
The podcast that connects you with the people, events, headlines, and lifestyle interests of the global LGBTQ+ community. Here's Richie Roy and John McMullen.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of Richie and John. It is not Newsday Tuesday. It is, in fact, Substantial Saturday. It is our show of the week where we don't talk about current events, but we rather get into something a little bit different and sort of have a little more of a sustained conversation about a topic of interest. I'm here, of course, with the wonderful John McMullen, my co-host, and we are also here with our good friend and regular correspondent, Todd Bianco, our automobile expert. And there's a lot to talk about, weirdly enough.
Yes.
There's a lot to talk about because it turns out, we talk a lot about electric cars. We've talked with you about them because all three of us actually are electric car drivers, it turns out. But there's a certain CEO of a certain electric car company that also happens to be maybe destroying the federal government as we speak.
Well, come on. You're talking about the co-president here.
Yeah, well, yeah.
The president with his child.
Right.
And I'm not talking about X.
Right, exactly. But yeah, so we're talking Elon Musk, of course, and Tesla. But, so I think there are there's a lot of interesting things to talk about with this. And, I think we're going to talk about what it means to own a Tesla right now, what it means to use Tesla charging stations. I know I use them. They're the Rivian can connect to that network, and it is the far and away the most robust. And in fact, we're seeing moves by the current administration to make it harder for other people to build out networks. We're seeing actually charging stations at federal buildings being shut down. And we're seeing federal subsidies and federal programs to make electric vehicle charging stations more plentiful being cut. Tesla has a huge leg up and will probably either maintain that monopoly or that sort of leg up or become a monopoly, in this new oligarchy. There's a lot to talk about here. So Todd, as the Tesla owner amongst us, how are you feeling at the moment?
Well, I don't feel good about it, but at least I'm driving a Model 3 and it's, 7 years old. So it's not that it's brand new. If it was the Cybertruck, it'd be a different story. I know 3 people who canceled their orders for Cybertrucks because they just, and they told everybody I know has told Tesla the same thing. I'm not doing this because of Elon. And so I know that Tesla's sales has heard this many, 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 many times because the number of people on, let's say, the middle to the left side of politics is a much more inclined probably to be concerned about the environment and to consider driving electric cars. And it certainly was California that basically made Tesla a profitable company because you drive around the streets here in Palm Springs, John, where I'm from in Los Angeles as well. It is Elon. It is Tesla everywhere. Yeah. Everybody's got one. And, the Model 3 in 2023 was the best-selling car in the world. And they believe it's going to tip the scales again in 2024 as the worldwide best-selling.
You know what's been interesting and that I've found just in this past week driving around town is I see almost as many Cadillacs and Nissans.
Well, there's Nissan, but there's a lot of Hyundai and Kia.
Yeah. But I am amazed. Like there's like a particular model of a vehicle that's a Cadillac that I must have seen like 9 times in different places across the valley.
The
This
Lyric,
Yeah.
kind of like a station wagon, kind of a little bit tall. Yeah. The Lyric, it's not a bad looking car.
I have no idea about anything about it. I'm just saying it's interesting to start seeing a lot of cars that I've never heard of before that happen to be electric vehicles, and that people are making choices other than just going with Tesla, who was really the vehicle of choice for so long because that's what we had access to, and it was kind of a cool thing and all that.
Right.
Then all of a sudden, these weird looking trucks started exploding. I mean,
Okay, now the one that exploded in Las
I
Vegas
heard
wasn't his fault.
on Thursday this week, I did hear somebody say it's interesting now that he wants to be in charge of transportation and airplanes and how we deal with air safety in this country when people have trucks of his that end up becoming balls of flame.
There's not that many.
Well,
There aren't. There really aren't.
the PR would suggest
I think
otherwise.
there's been an oversized number of that's been reported on versus what's happened. I mean, and the one that happened in Las Vegas was not his fault.
Well,
I mean,
yeah.
that was. I mean, the
There
guy was
foul
pretty
play.
crazy. I mean, you saw his text messages about he'd rented this car and he was so thrilled to drive it, and how about this is the greatest thing. I'm so happy I got to drive the car. On and on and on. And then he, blew it up and killed himself.
I
Who knows which order that was, but
fully understand that there was foul play at hand in that particular thing. But still, the point is, I think that we want people to still be buying electric vehicles,
Sure.
and it's still the way to go. But because of what he has done with this new administration and the craziness that's come with it, I think it really has made people have to pause and think about what their consumer choices are, and also to think about, gosh, I don't want to be branded as a person who did business with that guy, even though I maybe did it long before he showed us that he was this crazy.
right. And I totally understand that. There's another factor too, is that everybody's desperately afraid they're going to take away the $7,500 federal tax credit. And you can still get it right now if you lease a car. They'll wrap it into the lease.
Yep.
So that's why you're seeing a lot of the cars that you're seeing right now on the road, they're leased. And they're leased at a fairly low rate, because you can, even if the battery doesn't qualify, like if you were to purchase the car, you may not get the $7,500 taken off the top because the battery may not qualify. There may be components that don't qualify. It's not made in the United States. It's made in China, which people don't understand. We have cars made in China sold here today, and no one knows it. There's Buicks made in China, Polestars made in China, and Volvos made in China. And we don't seem to care.
I thought Volvos came from Scandinavia.
You think, but they're not. They're owned by,
They
they're owned
haven't
by,
for years. They haven't. Yeah.
well, no, some still do. There are some that still do, but they also have a plant in South Carolina, and they also, but they're owned by Geely, and Geely is a mega huge corporation in Japan, in China, that owns a lot of other brands. They own Lotus, they own Proton, they own Lynk & Co, they own Zeekr. There's a plethora of brands they have out there, including Volvo and Polestar. They control all those companies. And many times there's models, not all models. Some models come from China, some don't. So it just depends. But right now you can get around the sourcing rules if you lease it. So there's a lot of people who are saying, this might be my chance for the next 3 years. Let's say your lease is for 3 years. Just pick a number for me to get a nice low rate on a car that I like. It's not a Tesla because I can't get, but I can get it at a good lease rate. They're giving it away. I have a friend who,
my Aria is a lease for 3 years.
Yeah.
I figured that would at least give me an opportunity to get in and even determine if I like the vehicle.
Yeah, I have a friend who leased a Model 3 last year, and they were having it was $325 a month for 3 years. for the long range for the standard range rear drive model. He got an email just like yesterday or the day before from Polestar offering him, maybe you want to come visit us, we'll give you a $20,000 discount. The reality is the car is probably $20,000 more than the Model 3. So they got to do something. Polestar's losing money. Rivian's losing money. Lucid, the CEO, just resigned. They lost the Saudis. The Saudis, our friends, the Saudis, control most of Lucid. And he's only lost them about, 13 billion. And they lose more than their cars retail between, $80 and $100 to $225,000. And well, they're all like, if you get the Lucid Air Grand Touring Sapphire, whatever it is, the fastest car in the world, electric car, it's like 225,000, but they lose more than 300 per vehicle.
That's insane.
And Rivian's doing better, but not that much better. Rivian desperately needs the new models. The R2, which is the one I ordered, and the R3. Those two models, which I went to a Rivian event maybe 3 months ago in Venice. First of all, terrible location. It's right near Abercrombie. And I mean, there is no parking anywhere. That was a big event. And I mean, I had to park literally like 6 and 7 blocks away.
Not with all those waterways.
Well, we weren't quite in the Venice Canal area, but I mean, it's in the Venice section because that's hip and trendy.
Oh, you're talking about Venice and Los Angeles.
Yes, Venice and Los Angeles. It was, it's Abercrombie adjacent. So it's very hip and trendy, but there's no room for anybody there. And that was the closest service center. If I would buy a Rivian, that's the closest service center. It's a schlep for me to go from, where I am in West Hollywood to the beach, essentially, just for service. I mean, unless they can come like Tesla sometimes does and does roving service, but nobody is built out like Tesla is. People complain about Tesla service, but they have far bigger infrastructure as far as that goes. And they have a far more robust, we all know that their charging system is the best out there. And yeah, it's kind of tough. I mean, where do you go? The really cool one. Have you heard of Ionna? IONNA? They're trying to build out all over the country, and they're like travel centers. Beautiful, they have big canopies with solar panels on top, and they have lounges and a convenience store, and everybody come and charge your car here, any brand. We'll charge here, and I looked up the closest one. I think the closest one was in Kansas. Not going to work for me.
I mean, and that's the thing. Like, I think that the thing that's really not troubling, but just for the future of electric vehicles, kind of more generally, is it's good to have competition. It's good to have different options, and especially if you really don't like Tesla's business practices, again, the federal government kind of dismantling programs for building out charging infrastructure is a big deal, because Tesla already has such a leg up, and it really puts them in this position of power, literally. Because I will say, like, when I've had several brutally horrible experiences trying to charge my Rivian in New York City. One night, I drove around for 2 hours to an EV Go and a place that was supposed to be in Electrify America that was not there. And they were all on the map. But, and the EV Go didn't work, and there was a long line even. And I was driving around all through Queens trying to charge. And eventually I pulled over, and I was almost in tears. And I was like, am I just going to leave my car here on the side of the road and just go home on the train and just never get my car back? What am I going to do? So finally I plugged in my home address on the navigation, and it took me into New Jersey to a Tesla charging station. And there were 12 beautiful chargers ready to go, plenty of room. There is no comparison, because these Electrify America and EV Go and ChargePoint and all that, they're few and far between. They're janky. They're often broken. And by comparison, the Tesla stations are usually also pretty well situated. Their real estate team is smart. They're usually in a place where there is a service, like there's either a restaurant or something, a place with bathrooms, or it's lit, and so
to me is literally there's five or six chargers sitting 4 or 5 blocks from my home at a Sonic drive-in.
Oh yeah. Mm-hmm. I've driven by there. Yeah. Yeah. But they're, and literally if you use
busy too.
Well, but because I use the ones at the museum here. There's in the basement level of the parking structure across from the Palm Springs Art Museum. Mm-hmm. There's like a couple of dozen charging stations down there,
right?
And they're very fast. They're easy to use. If you've ever, Richie, you went to a Tesla charging station. Have you been to one?
Well, many, yeah.
Yeah, they're easy to use though. You just plug it in and it's automatically comes up on your Rivian app or on your screen.
Yeah, it comes up and it's all it's charged through Rivian, so you plug it in, right, and I get charged through my Rivian account.
Right.
It's very easy. The only thing actually that is funny and
it does the proper handshake. That's what they call it.
It does a handshake.
When you plug it in, it recognizes who you are because you've already registered. So it knows that you're in a Rivian R1S and it knows who you are because then it automatically routes to your account. So the back end software works. I can't say that for ChargePoint or EVgo or Electrify America, and you know what Electrify America is, right?
It's Volkswagen. It was part of the settlement after
Dieselgate.
The Dieselgate. Yeah, exactly. Right.
The Dieselgate, and it doesn't work. It's bad.
It's terrible.
People say this all the time. It's terrible. God bless the city of West Hollywood, but they just built a whole new public parking lot on this site that they bought years ago and had been sitting there completely fenced off for 8 years. And people kept saying, do something with it. It's right on the corner of Santa Monica Boulevard and Crescent Heights. It's a prominent intersection. It was going to be some development. They bought it because the development went out. So they bought it and it's been sitting there. So they paved it finally. They put up a parking lot and then they put in the most bizarre looking four charging. There's probably 60 spaces in this lot and there's 4 for charging. In the middle of Los Angeles.
Yeah.
And I've never even heard of this brand before. It's like, where did this come from? I'm looking at it. I went to look at it and I was like, I don't even know. I've never even heard of this. And
it's somebody's brother-in-law.
I don't know. But now here's the problem. When you talk about what the federal government was doing, because they had been funds allocated for building out the infrastructure through the infrastructure project Inflation Reduction Act, I think. I think it came through the Inflation Reduction Act.
I think you're right. Yeah.
And the problem, Tesla can build a supercharger station for a quarter of what these other people were charging because Tesla prefabs the whole thing. Their engineering team comes in and does a whole layout. They make sure that the power is sent. They have to get the utilities to route sufficient power to their location. So there's the engineering team comes and does that. They can prefab all these, the supercharger things. They make them themselves. It's not made by anybody else. Tesla makes all of their own equipment. And so they make everything. They make it in prefab blocks, like a 5, they just truck them in already prefabbed and then they bolt them to the ground and hook them up to the power sources. And they can do that in a fraction of the time for a fraction of the price. And of course, Elon Musk had his butt hurt because they didn't get any contracts with the federal government. All these other companies were getting contracts and it was costing, I can understand the criticism. It's costing us, quote, the taxpayers, because this is the Inflation Reduction Act, it's costing us 4 times what Tesla would have charged to put them in. I don't know how to answer that. How do you answer somebody? How do we say somebody, well, Tesla shouldn't get the contract because they already have too many, right? But why should we be paying 4 times as much for another company to come in and do it?
Or he told you, brothers-in-law.
I don't have a good answer for that.
But-
I really don't.
I mean, obviously, I think federal contracting is extremely complicated.
It is.
So, and I don't really know that. I mean, now it is not, apparently, because if you're Elon Musk, you can shut down the FAA and then cancel their Verizon contract and give it to Starlink. So now maybe he can get all the contracts himself. But it brings up a bigger question, which is, so Tesla is obviously the big player in electric vehicles and has clearly the best charging network by far. In a similar vein, Amazon, by and large, has the best logistics and often the best prices for the biggest sort of array of products. What do you do when the easiest and best choice is also a reprehensible oligarch who is a sycophant to or actively co-presidenting with an authoritarian asshole? What do you do with that?
I don't have a good answer for that either. I mean, look what just happened to the Washington Post. I mean,
that's what I'm saying. Exactly. Yeah.
I mean, Bezos just decided that they were going to cover certain things and not other things. It's like, and the editors are starting to resign. It's
right.
And I mean, that's not Amazon per se, but it's Jeff Bezos using his power to do these kinds of. I mean, you saw that Tim Cook gave $1 million for the slush fund for the
inauguration, right? Mm-hmm.
And he just agreed to spend $500 billion on server farms in the United States and
wait,
Texas.
on what? On what?
Server farms, AI. I mean, Texas is a good spot for it, don't you think? Can't imagine why.
I don't know. I'm taking his pink card away from him. Fuck him.
Right, he's gay. We know he's gay. And this isn't a secret, and yet he's playing along with what all these other people are doing. And I don't have I use Apple products.
Well, and the thing is, but this goes to the sort of central part of my question, which is, what do you do in these situations? Because again, cell phones are by and large kind of something you just need to have these days, right? Apple makes, as far as I'm concerned, the very best one. Probably the second best would be maybe Google, but both of them, they were on the dais for the inauguration. They both caved and have decided to call the Gulf of Mexico the Gulf of America on their mapping apps. And so what do we do in a world where a lot of our choices are not choices at all? I mean, clearly we've talked on this show before that a buying choice is to go to Costco, because Costco at least is kind of holding strong on DEI and generally on, by and large kind of having the values that we espouse, generally. Although, they're not blameless either in terms of certain things like unionization. But
Target. Target.
Well, honestly, there are companies that I still want to be able to do commerce with, because I think that they've done the right thing in terms of holding the line on things like the DEI issues, such as several of the major airlines, Delta, American, United. But honestly, I don't feel safe to be in the skies until we get this issue resolved. I mean, they're now, after having all these junior high school kids fire these people who we were reliant on to fly safely in the skies across the world.
Critical safety infrastructure.
Exactly. Now they're going and begging these people to come back to work for them. And
Would you want to?
I'd just say, fuck you.
I mean, I wouldn't want to come back, because you could be fired just as 2 weeks from now. Bye again. We're gonna, we're tired of that. Okay, we're gonna do something else. It pisses me off to no end when they came in and decided that they were going to. Well, these computer systems are outdated. No shit, Sherlock. They've been outdated, and they've been begging to update these systems for decades.
Right.
And Congress won't give them money. Suddenly, Oligarch comes in and says, we need to put in new systems. And it's like, oh, that's a good idea. Really? I mean, now you're going to tell us this?
Not a new idea.
No, it's not a new idea, but they've been begging for this money for years. Sure, we'd like to upgrade this. Sure, we'd like to do those kinds of things. And yet that doesn't happen.
Well,
I don't know how this gets us back to electric cars or any sort of infrastructure issues. All these things are just very frustrating when I know that I guarantee you these departments, the IRS, one of my favorite, they're the ones that process our refunds. And by the way, the people they're firing, they're not auditing you and me. They're auditing the mega corporations, which, I have seen back 5,000 years ago in my glory days as an auditor. I did a small, it was considered big, Getty Oil. And Getty Oil's tax return was literally 4 feet tall. The printed version.
Yeah.
Back then, people had printed versions of these things. And that's Getty Oil, which was swallowed up by Texaco or something like that. So these mega corporations, they have money just laying on the table, any number of things that they've done, any number of transactions that can be reversed or that can be interpreted differently. They don't care that they write a check for another 100 million. That's nothing. That's to make the auditors go away. But if you don't have the auditors there, guess what? And the mega rich people who are evading taxes and legally evading taxes in many cases, because I can tell you how Elon lives and I can tell you how Jeff Bezos lives. They borrow all their money. It's all leverage. They don't sell stock. They don't have to. The banks will give them, do you need a few $100 million? No problem. Just pledge your stock and, we'll go on. A loan is not taxable income. And, when you need a new loan, they'll rewrite the loan. It's no big deal. They don't care. And, they just take another loan out. They don't have to sell, like I think Elon had to sell a ton of Tesla stock when he bought Twitter. That cost a shit ton of taxes. That had to cost at least $2 or $3 billion in actual taxes. So in that year, he probably did pay more than most human beings will ever see in their entire lives. But he also he got a lot of money from it, and so he should have paid taxes. But most large, high net worth individuals simply borrow the money they want to finance their lifestyles. They don't care. The interest is deductible as investment interest, and they just go about borrowing more money if they needed more money to pay a baby mama, to buy a new house. You might need another yacht, Jeff Bezos, because you only have 3, I think. And you need a yacht to follow the yacht because you're going to have enough people for, help. Well, the help.
Yeah.
You don't want
of course. Yeah. The housekeeper's yacht. Of course. Yeah. Right.
Right. You don't want any of those things. So, you've got to have all that infrastructure, that follows you. These are problems all over the place, but they're firing all the auditors who would be the ones that going after those people because that's where the money is. They are by far, like the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau is getting billions back for the little people, and the people at the IRS, the auditor levels, they're not going, I don't make enough money, you don't make enough money. They're going after the big dollars because that's where the big money is. You might get a letter in the mail saying you didn't match a 1099, but they're not going after most people these days. They're going after the big boys because that's where the big money is. So the return on investment of paying an auditor, I don't know, $80,000, $100,000, whatever they're paying them a year, is 10, 12, 100-fold, by just, auditing some rich people or some mega corporations that, are multinationals.
So let me ask you guys a question. There was a movement around the country for yesterday. For those who are joining us, this is Saturday, and yesterday there was a national, boycott to
Buy
not
Nothing Day.
Spend money anywhere around the country and basically show the power of the consumer in the United States.
Was it for one day or a week?
Yeah. No, it was for a day. Yeah. And do you think that can work? Do you think it made any difference? You can argue that people are never going to quit spending everything, but can we really make a difference that way? Or do we just have to, buck up and get through these 4 years?
I don't think it's going to be enough. I think it would have to be a longer don't buy anything period. Don't buy any clothes, don't buy any, any large purchases or anything, but people are still going to have to go to the grocery store. There's still going to be, I have automatic payments on my credit cards for any number of, a streaming service or whatever, hits my credit card. So all these kinds of things, even if I'm not actually physically out there, swiping away or handing cash to somebody.
That brings up a good point. This past week, I made a decision after the announcement that was made about what Mr. Bezos told his team at the Washington Post, they had to do in terms of the editorial page. And I actually made a decision to stop, at least for now, consuming anything through Amazon. And by anything, I mean, there goes my Amazon Music, there goes my Amazon Prime, there goes my Amazon Visa credit card with JP Morgan Chase Bank, who, by the way, I'm also cutting ties with because they promised that they were not going to capitulate on the DEI, and then their CEO did exactly that. And, and I don't know that I'll find another bank that isn't doing that also, but I don't want one that told me to my face, publicly to the whole world that they weren't going to do that and then abandon us and have pretended to be in our corner at pride events and so on.
Yeah, Jamie Dimon didn't really care.
I honestly don't know that I will renew or do further business with Nissan. I've purchased 6 vehicles and leased one more from them now, and they caved on DEI. So I've decided that for me, the best thing I could do is cut that credit card up and send it to Jeff and tell him to go fuck himself. I actually was part of a team of people who had a company that was sold to him several years ago that I also got screwed over on, and that they made millions and millions of dollars off of. And I have not ever had any respect for him, but now I have even less than none. And so that's the only thing that I as an individual can do, is to make the choices to not do business with these people. And some people say, well, one person's not going to make a difference, but all of us collectively who feel that way would make a huge difference, I feel. And I think that the idea that people went out this past week and at least tried to show for a day that they could have impact, I would just remind you of something else. We had another major event that had a huge financial impact on corporate America that happened just a few years ago when we were all told to stay home and to not be spreading our germs. And we fucked America up in a good way, I think. I think we got people's attention. So I believe that if we really are committed to it, we can buckle down again and do the same kind of thing by not spending on things that we just absolutely do not need to have. Yes, we have to have staples to survive as a human being. Yes, we have to take care of our pets, but do you really need, new socks and underwear? Do you really need that flashy new ring? Do you really need a new car? I would just put stuff on hold right now until we have people who prove that they're responsible to our needs and to our wishes, and then do business with those people.
I think it's a good idea. The question is who? At some point, it covers almost everybody. It covers most of corporate America seems to have caved in. Not all, you're right, but
I'm looking for every mom and pop business I know where I can actually have a conversation with somebody and find out, where do you fall on this scale? And if we're in alignment, I'm going to support them because I don't want them to go out of business.
And if there's a red hat?
That is actually the kind of elephant in the room, I think, literally. There are so many situations. So we've seen these huge corporations are kind of falling, just like literally pissing on themselves like, a puppy, to fall in line with this administration because of economic interests, and they just don't care about diversity or the LGBTQ community or a lot of things. And they never were good corporate citizens. A lot of them eviscerated sort of the American business landscape through sharp practices, whether it's Walmart or Amazon or you name it. And there's been, a lot of, over time, accretion of power in increasingly few hands. And so, the idea of like small business, it's like they're local, their name, who they are. They're not Jeff Bezos. A lot of times, because I found this to be the case because I went a number of years ago, I decided with clothing specifically that I really wanted to buy American-made clothing. I did not want to buy clothing made in sweatshops, where God knows what practices. Yeah, yeah, and it's always a new country. They're always looking for the cheapest wage and the worst.
Bangladesh, Vietnam.
And so I was like, you know what? I'm only going to buy clothes made in America, because at least I know that there's at least a baseline. Union made, all the better, but at least I know it's made in this country where there's at least a minimum wage, whatever. First of all, it's hard to find that. Second of all, if you start poking around, a lot of these small businesses are run by people who are in small business in this country, not just clothing, but just generally. They are voting interests. If you start poking at their webpage, if you start looking around, you're going to find MAGA hats in a lot of these places. A lot of small business owners are aligned with Republican values and are MAGA. And so what is your choice? An oligarch who is basically, just dismantling and buying this country off for parts, or a small business that is run by someone who, doesn't want people of color to be their employees? What's the good option there?
Well, look, here's what I believe. In the end, I think that we will prevail with having businesses emerge out of these opportunities that are being created. There are definitely a lot of entrepreneurs and creative people on our side of the fence. And as a result, I think, those needs will lead to innovation and to enterprise that will be able to be supported by us and to feel good about doing that. And it may not be immediate, but I'm surprised by the amount of progressive related things that I see being advertised even in social media. And as you know, Richie, when we were doing the GayBC Happy Hour, I was looking at some products that, I was thinking we could have some fun with as merch for the show, and made a decision actually to cancel an order on a number of things after I found out that it was a very right-leaning, mega crazy manufacturer. Yep. That was a smaller mom and pop business that I was actually really looking forward to doing business with here in the U.S. because I knew that they were a small business. But then as soon as I found out what they were really up to, no, yeah. We have to educate ourselves, not give up. And if you've got ideas and you think, I'm not like that, but I know I could do this or I could do that, especially at a time when many of us are going to be looking for new opportunities and things to do to make life better for us, do them. And I want to see some of these, I hate to admit it, but, our community has a few billionaires who are not the Peter Thiels and so on. I want to see some of these people who are on the progressive side of things who have those kinds of fortunes investing in these kinds of things. And, somebody who I think has really begun to make some difference in the world for the better, who is in the billionaire class, is Mackenzie, Jeff Bezos' ex-wife. She has put an enormous amount of money into organizations and into individuals who are doing things to make a change for the better. And that's got to piss him off something crazy.
She bought the Atlantic, didn't she?
I don't know if she did that, but I've definitely read about other things, and I know for a fact, I know somebody who actually is a fundraiser for the local junior college here in the Coachella Valley, and she gave them an enormous grant. And she's been doing that with schools all over the place that deal with people who are less fortunate and otherwise would be challenged to get continuing education at the post-secondary level.
Yeah, I think that somebody like that is a good counter. But then we have to watch out for the other crazy one, the one that was married, the man married to Sergey Brin, the one that was JFK's running mate, the woman. And she was married to one of the two Google boys, and she's worth untold billions.
Well, you're not going to win them all, but I'm just saying that our side needs to align itself with these people who are interested in making sure that that enterprises that are being started and operated by people who are committed to our ideals, that we find those people, that we support them, and that we buy their products and continue to, do things that are going to return the benefit to our communities.
I agree. But I do think we also need to focus on electing the right people to be in Congress because
Of course.
right now there's no spine. The reason I mentioned that woman who was married to one of the Google boys is because she was his RFK's running mate, and she put out a threat to any senator that voted against his confirmation that she would make sure that if they voted against him, that they would never be reelected ever again, and they all capitulated.
So, I mean, I think
We got to have better than that.
So, I think that that's kind of a good place to end this, is really about bravery. And, what we're seeing is a lack of bravery or courage or even a spine from a lot of people who, because of their economic interest,
Todd, you're talking about Nicole Shanahan.
That's it. Yes.
These business owners, the Republican Congress people that any of them, I think, who have a bone in their body. I mean, any of the stuff about Ukraine has got to make them feel sick to their stomach. I mean, seeing, Trump essentially capitulating and cozying up to Putin. If you're a Republican who is, who has a little picture of Reagan up in your bedroom,
Saint Reagan.
to your stomach that you, because you're a coward, you have to toe the line with someone who is essentially selling the country out from under itself. But so we're not seeing courage there. We're not seeing courage from business, these business interests. But what we hope to see is courage wherever we can find it, in small places.
I want to take just a second to mention somebody who I think showed an enormous amount of courage and has been one of the leading voices for our side ever since Donald Trump took office and before the first time. And that act of courage happened last Monday on MSNBC when Rachel Maddow went on the air after they fired they fired both of the hosts who were female that were people of color that they had on primetime shows. Both Alex Wagner, while she was not fired, she is now demoted to being a correspondent, but they got rid of Joyanne Reed, who did the Readout show. And Joy was a very loud and proud person who represented, I think, with great distinction, the African-American community on television. And the way that they pushed her out and that they did it during, Black History Month, and it was done by this new leader of MSNBC that they brought in from CNN. I think the whole thing stunk. And I have to say, I think that my dear friend Rachel Maddow was extraordinarily brave going on her network, on her show, and holding them with their feet to the fire and telling the nation that her company did wrong, that they did wrong by Joy and that they did wrong by the audience, and that she does not agree with it. And it's not her decision to make, and she talked about that. But she certainly took an axe to them. And I thought, wow, that's somebody in journalism who is willing to put their own job on the line. And nobody makes more money at that network than she does. It would be very easy for them, I'm sure, to tell her to get the hell off of our payroll. But if they do that, I think they also understand that they stand to lose an enormous amount of revenue as well. And so she was able to get away with it. And thank God she did. And I'm sure we're going to see more of the same kind of action happening out of the newsroom from the Washington Post and other journalistic institutions that face those same kinds of threats because of this insane administration. So
Yeah,
Rachel Maddow is my hero of the week for what she did for Joy.
I love Rachel. I also think I think Comcast is getting ready to dump all of their cable stations, and they're just preparing everything for a sale. They've already transferred.
Well, they've already split it off into
transferred.
Entity. Yeah,
but they've already transferred it to a separate entity. What do they call the separate entity? ABC Co. I mean, literally something like that stupid. Because they didn't even have a name for it yet. No. So I think they called it Spin-off Co.
It's probably Spinco. Yeah, I mean, usually that's the off the shelf name when you're doing that stuff is you have Spinco. Yeah, so yeah, they didn't even bother to give it a different name.
I think
they're just getting ready. Well,
you know what I think, honestly, as somebody who has experience with this, I think that we should pluck the peacock's feathers and give them to Richie's cats.
Yes, they do love it. They do love a peacock feather.
Well, you can't go wrong with that. And when I was a kid, I used to love peacock feathers. I thought we had like 2 or 3 of them that we found at some. We went to some farm that had peacocks, and I picked them up as a little kid. I was thrilled. They were so pretty.
Richie, I will see you on Newsday Tuesday. Todd, thank you again for joining us and talking about these topics tonight. We'll look forward to having you back when it's time to talk cars again.
Yeah,
absolutely. Well, it's been a pleasure, guys. I appreciate the invitation.
And if you'd like to write to us in the meantime, you can go to our website at Richie and John. That's RichieandJohn, richieandjohn.com. And the forms are all there. You can find our phone numbers and our email address and everything right there at that website at the bottom of the page. We'd love to hear from you. So have a great week, and I will see you on Tuesday.
See you then.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you for joining us on Richie and John. This podcast is a production of the Mutual Broadcasting System and is available at richieandjohn.com, as well as most major podcast portals, including Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, and Spotify.